Hi, everyone. Welcome to Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. I'm Langdon DeMint.
And I'm Julian Taylor.
And welcome to our podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Two Bald Guys. Actually, it should be 2.5 bald guys talking safety today, shouldn't it?
Shots fired.
We do have a guest. But he does still have a semblance of a hairstyle. So,
thank you.
Which I think is fair to say.
There's a compliment there somewhere.
Yeah. Langdon, good to see you. I'll let you just regain your composure as I insult our guest.
You know,
I'm used to it, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, when you were doing the intro, I was thinking, I wonder what Jules is going to say. And I was like, he can't say receding hairline. You can't say that, but he proved me wrong. So
just went
well done. I love it, man.
But it's a
Chris,
sign,
it is great to have you, though.
You were saying yesterday, Langdon, when we were talking, that actually this kind of joshing is a sign of a good friendship. And I do like to think that I've got a good friend on the podcast today. In Mr. Chris Newson. So really good to see you, Chris.
You too, Jules. I'm feeling very warmly welcomed already. You know,
good.
In preparation, I've watched episodes of the podcast leading up to this. I haven't seen quite this level of whatever you want to call it.
Joshing. Let's politely call it joshing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. I like it then.
Let it be known, this is the way it used to be. I prefer heavy, jovial discussion to begin, and then we get to the point. And I was told to reel it back. So just a little behind the scenes. I'm just going to go ahead and throw that out. I don't want our people to edit that, but it did happen. So this is this is perfect.
It wasn't Jules that told you to reel it in, was it?
No, it wasn't. No. It really wasn't.
No. So this
he
is
encourages
me. Rebelling slightly, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow.
Pushing back.
I feel like I'm part of something now.
Yeah.
This is a rebellion of baldness.
The rebel crew.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome. I do feel very Americanized, though, seeing Chris with all the football, true football, NFL football background.
Football.
Yeah, that's right.
Go Bears.
Yeah.
Oil. Gators, whatever. Yeah. I remembered.
Except, well done. I like it. I'm done. Jules, it's over to you. I'm good.
See, I'm a soccer fan, so and it grits me and hurts me to use that term, but I need to distinguish here. So I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Excellent. Do you support Sheffield United, Jules?
I do. Yeah. Do you want to mention the fact that we beat Sheffield Wednesday at the weekend?
You just have. So
I just have. I've managed to get that in. Moving on, Chris.
Yes, let's move on.
It's great to see you. For the sake of our listener, do you want to give a bit of a sort of biography of yourself, of who you are and what you do?
Okay. Yeah. So my name is Chris Newson. I'm the EHS Director at an organisation called Make UK. So as the name suggests, we're based in the UK and we're a trade body for the manufacturing industry. So my role is what it actually means. I mean, that's the title. But what I actually do is run a team of people who deliver services around EHS to our members, consultancy, training, whatever it might be. And of course, we have a very long-standing software partnership with your good selves. So we've known each other, Jules, for, I don't know, a long time.
A long time. Yeah. I don't think we need to put a number on it, but long time.
That's not. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's me anyway.
Is it worth, right quick, Jules, just to give a little insight, could you explain just a hair more about Make UK maybe for the States? Because I am aware, but for those that might not be, kind of what everything Make UK does for organizations.
Yeah, so we represent, in a nutshell, I'll elongate the nutshell if that's the thing. Thank you. Yeah. So we represent a group of manufacturing companies in the UK. So there might be massive companies, global companies that you've heard of that are based in the UK, or they might be very small, SMEs or smaller. So we represent. So what I mean by represent is we take their views on EHS matters, and we talk to governments. We've got very good links with current and previous governments. So we try to influence is a good word. We try to influence change for the good of manufacturing in the UK. And within our company, there's lots of different bits. Environment, health and safety is just one of those. So we've got a legal practice, we've got a HR consultancy, we've got an apprentice training area. But the bit that I'm responsible for is environment, health and safety. So in just what we actually do day to day and what might be pertinent to this conversation. So we go out to our members, these big or small or in between companies, and we give them advice on health and safety and environmental matters. So we come up against a lot of different cultures in organizations. So we see a lot of that. We've got experience of very, real, timely, right now, new, current views on or experience of, what you might call good cultures, bad cultures, somewhere in between, and the effect that has on things. So we feel like we're really in touch with current UK manufacturing businesses.
Thanks. No, I think that's helpful. Just to, because in the States we have similar, I'll say, consultancies, and there's similar trade associations, a lot of nonprofits that kind of help that can also provide services similar.
That's exactly what it is. So yeah, that's us.
The reason I think for getting Chris on is we've done quite a lot of work together over the years, haven't we, Chris? And I'm pretty confident that we're fairly well aligned in terms of some of the things that we think are important around safety and make a difference around safety. So I thought it'd just be good to get you on and sort of hear some of your experiences, particularly around, because manufacturing is such an intrinsic part of sort of business and industry globally. And there's some things that we always talk about. So we always tend to have a chat about culture. And I think one of the things that you said recently that I thought was a really interesting line, but something we can probably expand on, was people don't go to work intending to get hurt, which I thought was an interesting quote.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that might appear to people to not be like a groundbreaking statement to make. And some people might say it's obvious, so people don't go to work with the intention of getting hurt. So people might go, yeah, obviously. But some of the things we do in organizations would demonstrate that we don't actually remember that once we get into the heat of battle and into business. And what I mean by that is, if we think about in our own organizations and, anyone listening or watching to this, when something goes wrong, when there's an accident, is the first thing you do as a company to sort of, whose fault was it? Let's find out who got something wrong, who made the mistake, who did something. And if anyone thinks that action is intentional, I would suggest that they're wrong, or they're wrong most of the time. Because of that point, people don't go to work to hurt themselves. They don't do things, in other words, knowing that harm is going to come to them. That's the principle, I think. And if we all remembered that, it would lead us along the right path.
What's the danger of that blame culture then, Chris? That something's gone wrong, we're going to blame you for it happening?
Well, I mean, there's lots of different models we could talk about. Maybe we'll do that later. But just to answer that question, I mean, again, if you're in the thick of manufacturing and business in general and organizations, I suppose it's quite obvious. But in other ways, it might not be. Basically, if you go around blaming people, they're just not going to tell you things. That they're not going to. You go from people reporting accidents to them hiding them, and you never know about them, and you can very quickly think you've got a great health and safety management system because you don't have any accidents. The reality is you're having accidents, but no one's telling you about them. So it's quite simple psychology, isn't it? If you think you're going to get blamed and shouted at and some sort of negative reaction, you're not going to do it. So it stops people reporting accidents in essence.
It's almost like that childlike reaction, isn't it? As well of as a kid, when you do something wrong and you get a clip round, you get a clip round the head from your parents, or you get told off by your parents because you've done something wrong, and that starts to then define the way that you behave in future. like you say, you start to hide stuff. You don't tell them because you don't want that reaction again. And it's something we carry on, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, like many things, you learn it at a very young age. Well, depending on, we're all great parents, obviously, but if we all have moments, I'm sure, where someone says something's happened. I'm talking about children at home now, and you don't react in quite the way that you should or you'd want to, really. So you might raise your voice or whatever, and you sort of almost you put a huge barrier in place to them ever telling you anything again. And it's the same. I mean, we're just people. We get older, but those behaviours stay the same.
I'm still
but it is
scarred,
hard, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm still scarred to this day, and it's a long time ago from hitting a cricket ball through my dad's greenhouse. And I still remember the reaction to it. It's really interesting, though, isn't it? Because I know we people have talked about it forever, haven't they? But I'm interested to get your view. You work across a whole big sector. Typically, what do you find engagement is like with safety across the different businesses that you work with? And I know that's almost probably an unanswerable question, but I'm going to try it anyway.
Okay. Well, I mean, yes, it's an unanswerable question to give like a factual answer, but I can give you an opinion. And so, in that huge breadth of companies that we talk to, we definitely talk to some companies where there's very little engagement at all, and quite often they're signified by, you go into the company because they've got a safety problem, they've got an audit coming up, something like that, and you go in, and somewhere within the first half an hour, you're going to talk about leadership engagement, and we need you to be part of this, journey and initiative, whatever the word might be. And if the answer to that is, well, I don't want to be involved, you don't, just sort it out, just get the risk assessments done or whatever it might be. I as a leader don't want to get involved. We get that reaction. That never works. That's completely unsuccessful. And so we have to do things to address that. On the other hand, we talk to an equal amount of companies where the leadership is fully engaged, and they'll say, look, we want you to come in and look at our health and safety. And the reason often is because they want to improve health and safety, not just to pass an audit, if you see what I mean, but because they genuinely want to keep people safe. And if in that conversation, it's very clear they want to be involved and they want to be engaged, if you get that senior level buy-in, then everything else, I mean, the things go up and down, obviously, but then everything else is easier. Because in my experience, a lot of the companies we talk to in the UK, and cultures are different, obviously, but in the UK, a lot of it is led either intentionally or unintentionally by the leadership. We all know that, don't we? People that we hold in high esteem, if they don't look like they're interested, then we're not likely to be interested either, I would say.
I think that's an interesting thought also, is something you just said. There's really kind of a lot of times two different, I won't say, I mean, there's more than this, but a lot of times there's two scenarios where people are doing what they have to because of, it could be at a risk assessment, or because of they need to check the box, or they're engaged. Here, I'll say in more frequent times, what do you feel like you're seeing? And there's a reason I'm asking this, or what I'm going to get to. What do you feel like you're seeing more of, one way or the other, over the last, let's say, year?
Yeah, I as part of, I talked about, me being responsible for EHS. I'm responsible for, one of the things I'm responsible for is, how many courses do we sell, how many days visits do we have, etc. That is part of my responsibility. We need to bring revenue in to feed the rest of our policy type making business. So I will answer your question. I'm studying quite closely, how much engagement we get and how many people want to do this, that, and the other. What I'm seeing this year, certainly, and I was going to say in the UK, there's sort of uncertain economic times. I think it's everywhere, really. But what we're seeing this year is people really making a hard decision about what they want to do, what they want to pay for. And that leads to, at the moment anyway, legal compliance being a much more direct, a much more influential driver. If we get to that point where we're talking about whether people should do this work or not, the fact that it's the law, and in the UK we've got quite a strong enforcement body, that's appears to be a much higher driver than, looking after people, keeping people safe, etc. And before, I finish on that, that's a broad comment. It's not about anyone in particular. Some companies don't quite fall into that. But to answer your question, I think it's more the legal side, the compliance, you've got to do it sort of thing, unfortunately.
Well, and the reason I asked is something we've heard, and I don't want to, I guess, beat it continually, but something I've heard from organizations I've been working with, Jules and I talking to, and then partnership friends that are in the space, and similar. A lot of things right now is back to the basics. And then what is back to the basics? How can we do what we're quote unquote supposed to? So that's why I was curious your perspective, what's happening in the UK, because it seems like where we should be at a more proactive standpoint, when you really think about EHS, we're trying to figure out what is the baseline, what should it be, and how can we make sure we're doing it well. And for 2025, few years after COVID and what it did, and then the proactivity that we were doing beforehand, you would think we would be at a different point.
I agree. Yeah. And you would think, to that point, you would think that, things like well-being and mental health would get, in 2025, because of all that history, would get more airtime than they do. And I think it's interesting, the behaviour of organisations when it really comes to the crunch and they've got to make a decision. And by that, I mean they've got to spend some money. That's the only way to really answer that question. What's really important to people, to organisations. And it's hard because, if you ask any CEO, why do you exist? Why does your company exist? The answer is, one of the top three answers is to make money and to deliver, shareholder wealth, whatever it might be. So that's always got to be there. But I think increasingly, one of those top three answers as well should be, for the good of the people, to have some positive impact on the people we employ. I think that should be the case, and it is with some organisations, but I don't think it's as widespread as we'd want it to be.
So one of the questions, Chris, then is how do you align the good of the people to the profitability and the shareholder value?
I'm not going to be able to answer that question straight away there. Obviously, I mean, it's sort of the holy grail, isn't it, right? But I mean, something interesting on that, I think, is that actually, if you do genuinely take people's well-being and safety, that whole thing, let's put it all together, like how people are going to leave the factory at the end of the day. If you take that seriously as a leader, if that genuinely matters to you, then that will lead to better productivity. It will lead to, by default, it'll lead to legal compliance in the UK anyway, because that's all the UK law asks you to do. Yeah, we've got to do things like risk assessments and so on, but that's a good way to keep people safe. So I think sometimes things get a bit mixed up. And, to the point we're talking about here, if, the main driver is I've got to comply with the law. Yeah, but just by looking after people, really, you comply with the law. If you understand the law, that is the case. But the problem is a lot of people don't understand the law and they think you have to tick a box and do a risk assessment. The reason you do a risk assessment is to keep someone safe.
It's interesting stuff, isn't it? And there's plenty of research out there. There's plenty of anecdotal stuff as well that actually says safe organisations tend to be profitable and good quality organisations. And people like Sidney Dekker have delved into it over the years, haven't they? And there is that definite correlation. I'm interested because, and I think it's an interesting question to answer because we get quite a lot of people listen to the podcast who are fairly new to health and safety. We're almost talking here as though compliance is a pretty low bar. Why do we take that perspective that compliance is a pretty low bar?
again, I always caveat with in the UK, because, I don't know the ins and outs of laws in every country around the world, but in the UK, it's about keeping people safe. We've got one main top Health and Safety Act, and, it's got 40 something sections, but it says keep people safe. And in my experience, if you do that, the way you do that is through risk assessments, etc. If you do that, then you are complying. I'm sure I can be proved wrong here, but our enforcement agency, the HSE, don't go around prosecuting lots of companies that really do keep their people safe. So that's the first point. And to what you said around, I'm paraphrase what you said, but a safe company being a efficient company and therefore that leading to profitability, I think that's absolutely genuine. If you think about some elements of safety, having the right equipment, making the choices easy, having everything in the right place, all of that's going to lead to better productivity as well. So the two things go together. And just one last thing. I know I'm going on a bit here, but a lot of the time people have this misperception and think, well, I've got to spend lots and lots of money to do this, whatever it might be, survey or audit. Well, actually, if you've done a risk assessment, you look at what you've got to do. You probably haven't got to spend lots of money. I mean, you might have to, it depends what it is, okay, but you might not have to spend lots of money if you really understand what the law's asking you to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting, isn't it? It's sometimes when you think about how do you drive those sort of that better culture, and I'm not talking safety culture because we don't talk safety culture, but just generally business culture. It doesn't have to be expensive, complex things, does it? It can be really simple behaviors from leadership, for example, that actually start to make a difference in terms of the way people feel about the place they're working in. The words they use, it's the behaviors that are displayed, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I mean, it's not always the same in every organisation, but I think, 90-something% it would be my estimate, that the way the company is led by the leadership, by definition, either because they, and that could be because they intend something, so they're actively seen to be leading something, or people see their, let's call them, negative or bad behaviours, and they just copy them, So it's we when we talk to a company about culture, and I'm with you, not safety culture, just organisational culture. Honestly, step number one in our simplistic model of sort of fixing your company culture, step number one is gain leadership commitment. And if we can't do that, there's no point moving on to step two because it'll just fail. So that, as I said at the beginning, that's often a conversation we have with leaders around their part in this process. We can't lead it. We can help you and advise you, but they've got to lead it for it to be effective, I think.
Well, and we view it the same, that compliance, keeping that at the baseline. I mean, really, we have a maturity model, and I know it's perfectly in the middle because I don't mean it condescending, but that's what you're supposed to do. That's what the law says. So that this should be the bare minimum. And then you start thinking, what more can we do looking past that? Because in theory, to your point, if you maintain that, you should be keeping your organization healthy and safe. Now, valid, there's outliers, there's things that happen, but you're at least trying to provide a workplace that's free from hazards, that's keeping people safe, and likewise, your employees are wanting to work in the safest manner possible. I think that's a lot of times it's kind of like speeding. We think, oh, well, we can go just, vary here or here, but I mean, I speed. I'm not saying that occasionally, but it's one of those you feel like you can make those deviations in places, and that's where, if you don't watch out, you've gone down a slippery slope of now you're continually making these mistakes.
Do have to point out, Chris, he is a proper good old boy, and he has got a Hemi V8.
Excellent. Does it go fast?
I mean, it's in a truck form, so it's not.
It makes a lot of noise.
It does make noise, and it is quick. I mean, you can bark them.
Sounds good.
No, we'll move on quickly before we talk about electric cars.
So what you've got, Phil?
Yeah,
Anyway, let's move on. Yeah, sorry.
Move on. Great conversation that we've had there with Chris. If you've enjoyed it, be sure to come back for part 2, where we're going to carry on the discussion.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Two Bald Guys Talking Safety. Don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you stream your podcast, or you can visit us at evotix.com.
And if you've liked today's podcast or you found some value from it, we'd really appreciate it if you could head over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review or a rating. It really means a lot to us. Thank you.